Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to another edition of the Nickel Press Show, Start Sit Edition. This is the Week 5 edition. I am your host, Doug Moore. I'm a broadcast member over at the Nickel Press. Be sure to follow them at Twitter, Nickel Press Show. As always, joined by my broadcast partner, Mario Rotondi. And this week we're joined by Mike Valverde of Dynasty League Football. He's a writer over there. I've worked with him in the past. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing great, Doug. How's everything going with you today?
Yeah, I mean, everything's going pretty decently in terms of my fantasy teams and my money leagues. It's early, I guess you could say. It's early, and hopefully I'll have a better excuse next time. But, it's still Week 5, so we still got time to turn around. That's why we're here. Maybe I can get a little advice from you guys. And Mario, of course, as always, how are you?
Doing well. Looking forward to talking some Week 5 fantasy football. I can't believe we're past the quarter mark already. It flies by this season, but yeah, crazy game. That's all I can say about it.
Yeah, especially last night. Now that game didn't really affect much about fantasy football, especially how it ended. But again, crazy game how, Seattle and Detroit went to the wire. So I want to recap a little bit as we usually do. And probably the first area I want to talk about is somebody that even nobody predicted would be this good or even close to this good. That's Devontae Freeman out in Atlanta. He's off to, in the past couple weeks, a torrid start. I think he had at least 5 touchdowns. Leads the NFL in touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken. And he's now, a surefire running back one, it almost seems like every week. And part of the reason for that is, Tevin Coleman did go down with the broken ribs injury, and Devontae Freeman just took the job ever since. But reports are saying that Tevin Coleman could be back this week. So, Mike, we'll start with you. Want to get your insight. Do you think, especially with Tevin Coleman being back and just considering how ridiculous he's been, do you think that Devontae Freeman's going to keep up, putting up solid numbers that can, make him a must-start every week?
I wouldn't make him a must-start right away. I would see how this game plays out. I don't think Tevin Coleman is going to disappear. He's going to have an influence one way or the other. Now, if you're looking, say, to start one or the other, I would definitely look at Coleman as more of the standard type of league where Devontae Freeman, you definitely want him as a PPR because he can do both. He can score and he can catch out of the backfield. I do see Devontae Freeman having more of an impact than he previously did in the latter games, but how much more will he play on the field? It's just too hard to tell until you see it actually unfold starting this week.
Gotcha. Yeah, I find it hard to believe that, not so much that Tevin Coleman did anything wrong or did anything he wasn't playing well. It just injury popped up and then Devontae Freeman sort of just, took off and sort of hasn't looked back. Sticking with the Falcons real quick, Mario, I want to ask you, we've seen Roddy White in the past few weeks have zero impact in terms of what he does on the field and in fantasy football. I think he's seen, 4 targets in the past 2 weeks for only 2 catches and 8 yards. Is it time to drop him for, say, Leonard Hankerson, who's sort of taken over that number 2 job?
Yeah, it definitely looks like there has been a changing of the guard for the number 2 wide receiver position in Atlanta. I don't know if it's just because Roddy White has been so banged up over the past couple of years that they just don't feel that he can do that job anymore. But, Hankerson is definitely taken over. He has 8 targets last week. So that's like 25 total over his last 3 games. So, and Roddy White in that time only has 5 targets. So it's really, he's non-existent now. And I don't know if you want to drop him. I wouldn't go dropping him because anything can happen in football, as we know, with injury and stuff. But like I said, it's definitely a changing of the guard.
Yeah, no, it just seems like, age is catching up with him. And Henderson just seemed to be the more explosive guy, especially considering that offense. Just, Atlanta is somehow 4-0. Not to say that they aren't talented, but you don't really think of them as much of a team that could really sustain, winning all their games, especially with that defense. But, especially with Kyle Shanahan there, you see a lot of, players suddenly become fantasy football relevant. I sort of want to hop into another topic. We're seeing a lot of players coming off suspension, and one notable one that's coming back, and will be making a season debut this weekend is Antonio Gates. Now, we saw Ladarius Green in the meantime have a decent sort of pace go for him. He did play 3 games, had 14 catches, I believe had 2 touchdowns. But Antonio Gates will be back, and I'll be talking about him a little bit later. Mike, I want to ask you, what do you view Antonio Gates as? Do you think you can automatically go in and start him right away?
Yeah, it depends on your depth as far as the tight end goes. If you have, say, one of the upper echelon tight ends, then he's just going to be your backup, so leave him as your backup. But if he is someone that you drafted to be a starter, I think with his veteran leadership and his skills on the field, it's not going to take him long, especially playing as long as he has with Phillip Rivers. I don't think it's going to take him long to get back into the groove again. So I think, as I said, if he is your starter and you've just been waiting for him to get back off his suspension, then go ahead and put him in right away. But obviously you don't want to put him in over, like Travis Kelce or Gronkowski or those kind of things. So definitely play it to what your strengths are for your roster.
Yeah, considering that, especially we have a bye week. We have a bye week where Jordan Cameron, Greg Olsen, Kyle Rudolph are all on byes this week. And considering just how shallow the position is, I would think some people even were hard pressed to wait for him. I want to ask you, Mario, in San Diego now with Antonio Gates coming back, does this spell the end for Stevie Johnson and his, I'm not saying torrid, but consistent sort of pace he's put up in terms of fantasy value?
I'm sure it'll dip into his production somewhat, but Phillip Rivers is just known to dish the ball out all over the place, so I don't think he's going to take a major hit. Obviously getting a talented player like Gates back, but he's up there in age too. He was very productive last season also still, but I don't see Stevie Johnson going away, no.
Yeah, there's a lot of mouths to feed there, like you pointed out. You got Keenan Allen, you got Danny Woodhead. I actually read somewhere that Melvin Gordon actually lined up as a wide receiver a little bit this past weekend. You got Gates, and you just got a lot of wide receivers in there. I know Malcolm Floyd, I think, is out, suffered an injury, so there's just a lot of targets to throw to. I know he had about 360 yards passing and 2 touchdowns, Rivers that is. So I would only think that helps his fantasy value going forward, which is great for me because I own him in almost every league I have. So just want to move forward to sort of another situation, essentially a running back situation that we've sort of been monitoring before the season when they let their star go. That's the Dallas Cowboys. This past weekend, one of my favorite players in terms of fantasy value, Lance Dunbar, went down with a torn ACL and MCL. He's obviously out for the rest of the season. And they're saying right now that the Cowboys are not planning to sign anybody going forward. So you're stuck with the committee of Joseph Randle, Darren McFadden, and Christine Michael. Interesting things about that. Christine Michael only played 1 offensive snap on Sunday, and Joseph Randle only received, I believe, 2 carries in the second half. I remember writing yesterday that Darren McFadden is going to get more looks because he's the best receiving running back out of the 3. So, Mike, want to ask you, who does this hurt? Who does this help? Do you really think Christine Michael is going to get more looks? Do you think this hurts Randall, helps him? And what about McFadden? Do you think he'll become the new guy for their passing game?
Yeah, that's quite a mess that they have over there. I think this is a type of thing that you kind of, again, want to wait to see how it plays out. But I think Dallas really wants to rely on McFadden. Now, whether he has the skills to do, what he can do, what he has possible doing, or he's going to just crash and burn and get injured and, do all that kind of mess. Who knows? But I also think that with Michael, they're going to have they brought him over for a reason, and I think they're going to give him a shot and see what else he could do. But as far as the roster or fantasy purposes, I wouldn't start any one of those guys until I can see what is in line or what's in store for these guys, and then make decisions off of that. But to start any of them right now, I think is too risky.
Yeah, I think you're laying a lot of people down that you're not saying that Christine Michael is the MVP going forward. We've seen this for years where everybody thought he was going to be this superstar, and there's not to say he can't turn into a bigger role, but while he is decently enough worth holding, it's just hard to see a situation. That whole offense is a mess right now. Brandon Weeden at quarterback. You got Terrence Williams and Cole Beasley as your top two receivers. Jason Witten's all right, but then you got this whole running back situation. You never thought you'd see this, but you're really seeing some depth issues really come out. So hopefully, Tony Romo and Dez come back soon and make some fantasy owners happy.
It's almost sort of like a buffet where you have some good food there, but you never know what actually is good or isn't until you actually try it. And so most of the time it's a mess, and that's exactly what the Cowboys are like. They're like a buffet where sometimes it's good and sometimes it's just, why did I pick that out? So yeah, I totally agree with you about it being just they need to get those guys back to sort of situationalize and stabilize that roster.
Yeah, it seems like the world's worst potluck dinner, if I have to use a food analogy, where everybody brought their own little thing and it just turns out to be horrible. And just so who knows? Maybe we'll get a chef in there soon with Tony Romo. That was a horrible joke, but we'll move on to fantasy football where I know it's slightly more. Mario, I want to ask you real quick. This really, we don't know yet if this has any fantasy value or fantasy impact or not. We've seen a lot of players struggle in Miami right now. Miami, I believe, is on their bye week this week. But Joe Philbin was fired this past week, and we've seen a lot of players in Miami that we thought were going to be really good. Ryan Tannehill, who I had high hopes for. Jarvis Landry's been fine, but Lamar Miller, Devontae Parker. Help me out here, I'm forgetting. But it's just players we thought were going to do really good, and they haven't. With this firing and bringing in Dan Campbell, do you think this helps boost any of these players? Are we going to see brighter days ahead?
It's hard to say. He's the tight ends coach, I believe. So, I don't really know what he can bring to the table as far as for the offense. But that whole team has been in disarray. The defense has been playing horribly, too, which is a surprise because they were picked to be one of the top defenses. But I don't think anything can hurt for sure. You have to try something. It just was not working. Lamar Miller is just non-existent. It's crazy. People are picking this guy to be one of the top 5-10 running backs in the league, and he's not doing anything. Any kind of shakeup can help. That's just, it had to be done. So, again, it's a toss-up. I don't really know exactly too much about the new head coach, so I can't really say. But like I said, anything can help.
Yeah, you'd have to think, especially just the way that it's been poorly coached out there. Not to say that the players aren't at fault, but it's just we've seen this vanilla sort of play so far from their offense and even their defense too. And glad to know that the Patriots are safe and sound at the top. Now the Jets are 3-1, but the Dolphins are not going to be a threat anytime soon to the Patriots. just wanted to, real quick, the last game I wanted to recap, so the last situation, before we go more in depth with our waiver wires, I'm going to throw a few names at you guys. I would think this sort of muddies the situation a little bit more. Jeremy Hill scored 3 touchdowns on 9 carries this past weekend. And even though with that, Gio Bernard still saw more carries with, I believe, 12 carries. Mike, I want to ask you, going forward, what's going on with this situation? What should we do here if you own either Bernard, Hill, or both? How do we approach this week by week?
That's a good question. It's hard to tell because everybody had so much faith in Jeremy Hill, including me. I definitely had him as a top second-round choice, depending on how deep your league is. But he definitely fell in that second-round area, and then all of a sudden, here he comes, and he's just not doing anything. As you mentioned, he scored 3 touchdowns, but how close were those? Obviously that's not a Geo area, and so I think if you're in a standard, league, I think you definitely want to keep a hold of Hill. The PPR, I think it's just Bernard. So depending on what league you're in, either you have both and keep it that way, or if you have Hill, then maybe wait until he does something and then trade him, because I just don't think that he's going to be doing what he did last year. I think he's just going to be a disappointment. So if you can capitalize on a good game, then make that trade high. If not, then I don't think he's worth throwing away. I just don't think he's going to be matched to that second-round potential.
Yeah, Doug, if I could just add to that too. They had pretty much control of that whole game, and Hill still wasn't dominating the carries. So Mike makes a great point. I mean, that's the kind of game he should be dominating. And the fact that he wasn't getting the majority of the carries just shows you that it's going to be, a two-man show there. So he's going to be very touchdown dependent. So depending on what kind of league you play in, you might want to move on. If it's a PPR league, if you can get, a big haul back for him, if someone thinks, he got 3 touchdowns this week, let me go get him. I mean, I don't dislike him. I don't think he's a horrible player, but he's not going to do what I think we all expected him to do this year.
Yeah, I know, it's just hard to see him. It seems like they do run the ball, I believe, 51% of the time, but it's hard for both running backs to sustain value enough week to week for them to be, both started. We did see that last season at some points, and we really thought we saw what was going to be the future with Bernard being the passing down back and the backup change of pace sort of guy, and Jeremy Hill dominating the early downs. And just being a workhorse. And unfortunately, for Jeremy Hill owners, it hasn't turned out that way. And for Gio Bernard owners, he's getting more touches. So going forward, I would say if you can capitalize, like both of these guys said, capitalize on that 3 touchdown game and get something decent for him, definitely do it. Not to say he can't be fantasy relevant, but you're not going to see that kind of production out of him or anything close to that. I want to go into our waiver wire little piece real quick, sort of talk about guys that, whether they're worth picking up or not. The first one I want to ask, and this pains me to do it, because even one of our former guests, Lou, who was with us, I believe, 2 weeks ago, rubbed salt in my wound. He asked, what's the value of Ronnie Hillman as a joke? Because of my love for C.J. Anderson. So Mike, is Ronnie Hillman worth picking up now? Is he someone worth picking up? And then also, what's his sort of value going forward?
Yeah, I think if he's available on the waiver wire, I definitely would pick him up without any second thought about it. He definitely has the talent to do things. We've seen him do it last year. He can catch the ball. He does all things pretty well. I don't know the story on Jay Ajayi. I don't know if he's been named out the year or if he's going to come back or what the situation is about him, but he might have an effect later down the road. But I would definitely keep hold of him or pick him up. So I don't know what his ownership is. He should be pretty high, but yeah, either way, he should be owned.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just think it's unfortunately time where we got to start thinking C.J. Anderson and literally my heart is shaking right now to actually think he might not put up running back one numbers this season. I still have a glimmer of hope, but I would say Ronnie Hillman is definitely going to be a threat going forward. Want to ask a weird tight end question. I'm going to ask you, Mario, because I think you deserve it. The Browns, Gary Barnidge has put up 2 straight really good games in Cleveland. And I don't know if it's a fluke. I don't know if it's real. So help me out here. Is Gary Barnidge somebody who could put up low-end tight end one numbers?
I think he can. I wasn't really thrilled about him when we talked about him a couple of weeks ago, but he's part of that offense. They're throwing him the ball. He got touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. I mean, they're using him, so I know he's just a 30-year-old journeyman, but, you know, if you're getting use, especially at the tight end position, it's not really hard to be a low-end tight end one. So right now he's doing it, so I guess you have to use him while he's hot.
Yeah, no, I recommend actually people picking him up. He does have a really tough matchup this week, but I seriously think, you know, just considering the lack of weapons in Cleveland and the fact that they're going to have to throw the ball a lot to make up for their, you know, deficiencies on defense. He definitely could be a part of it. I can't believe it, but I have to ask 2 more questions about Browns players. And you never thought you'd have to ask if they're fantasy football relevant or not, but we've reached that point, I guess. And I guess fireballs are coming down from the earth any second now. Before they do, Mike, 2 names. I'm sure you know the names: Duke Johnson and Travis Benjamin. Duke's coming off a really good game, at least in the receiving game, and Travis Benjamin, for some reason, even when Johnny Manziel isn't there, is putting out numbers. So I'm going to hit you with 2 at once. What do you think of both these guys? Are they worth owning? And if so, what's their value going forward?
Yeah, I like both of them quite a bit. I think that as you're sort of hitting on, someone's got to catch the ball. I mean, take, for example, Carolina. I mean, Ginn is having, you know, this great year. Why? Because someone has to catch the ball. And Benjamin is sort of in that situation as well as Barnidge. And all 3, I think, have a great feature going through the season. Crow just hasn't gotten the job done, and Johnson has. And Johnson can do everything. So he's definitely, you know, passing down back. He can run. He can do it all. So teams like to see these rookies develop, and as quicker they can develop, the more they're going to put their trust in. And when the veteran on that team, I guess he's a veteran, he's only been there a couple of years, but when they start to falter and someone that's young and can push them and get through and move up that list, which I think definitely Duke Johnson is doing that. I think easily, maybe by, I hate to put predictions, but maybe week 8, you're going to see all Duke Johnson and Crow just coming off the bench and spell him. And then, yeah, like I said, I think Benjamin is doing a great job. He's going to be their target, and Barnidge is going to get probably a lot of junk time, like you're saying. So when they're behind, which they're probably always going to be, someone's going to have, there's going to be a passing offense. So I think those kind of short passes and stuff that they like to do, Barnidge is going to be a key element and all that.
Yeah, I noticed this, and I you know, unless there's some statistician who's going to come in and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Josh McCown has thrown at least 40 passes in the past 2 games consecutively. So it definitely shows that they're going to be throwing the ball a lot. And like you said, someone's got to catch it. This makes me think, what if Josh Gordon was playing? And that's, I guess, one of the great mysteries we'll never find out about. But I want to sort of switch over to a team that's on the bye this week. But something interesting that popped up. So in Minnesota, we have both Charles Johnson was out last game with his rib injury, and Mike Wallace. I don't know if he was injured or he didn't do much, but he was not in practice today, at least the open part of it. And Stephon Diggs, you know, the rookie out of Maryland, put up some decent numbers. And I'm curious to see, Mario, will go to you. Stephon Diggs is is kind of a name you didn't think about. But is he someone worth taking a look at, even though it's a bye week?
I would. I mean, he had 10 targets this past week. I know Charles Johnson didn't play like you mentioned, but I mean that's pretty significant. So I mean, they must have faith in the kid. So he's a speedster. He could be someone that could be sneaky, especially in the PPR league if he gets more playing time. So he's definitely someone I would take a look at. Absolutely.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think it was him and Adam Thielen or something like that, but I don't have much faith in Adam Thielen as much. And I guess the last person I want to ask, and it's probably the most obvious one, but for some reason he's only owned in 19% as of last week. Alan Hearns quietly has put at least 60 receiving yards in every game this season and had 15 targets this past weekend. I'm pretty sure I know that he should be picked up. My question is he somebody worth starting as, say, a flex every week, standard or PPR?
Oh, is that to me?
Yeah, that was for you. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's not a problem. The first couple games, he only had, I think, like 4 or 3 catches, and then, like you mentioned, he busted out for 11 receptions this week. It's kind of hard to project what he may do, but if you're sort of a risky player, I would say that he deserves a flex spot. I think that the way the Jaguars are seeming like they've improved since the previous year, and the way they're using their receivers, I think that why not? If someone put him in the flex spot, I would not be surprised by it. So if it's something that you feel like you want to try out, then go for it.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's going to depend on how well Blake Bortles plays. They're going to have to throw the ball a lot, considering their defense isn't exactly very good. I think they have a good few pieces on offense with Allen Robinson, T.J. Yeldon, and even Julius Thomas. Whenever he does actually come back, it could be something worth monitoring. But then also, Alan Hearns. Hearns has a special place in my heart. I remember last season I had predicted the first week of the season Alan Hearns was going to score at least 1 touchdown. He actually scored 2 touchdowns on 2 really long catches, and forever since I have a poster of him on my wall. Not really, but we'll go with it. So let's hop into the main section of our show. Can't believe we're already approaching the halfway point of our show. We're going to go into our starts and sits. Mike, not sure how familiar you are with the process, but don't worry, Mario and I got you. What we'll do is we're going to go over each position, one player at each position for both who we start this week and who we sit this week, and sort of give a reason why. We'll start with the quarterbacks, and we'll start with their who to start this week, and I will go first. So my quarterback this week that I'd recommend starting is Marcus Mariota, coming off a bye week along with New England. Facing Buffalo this week. Buffalo has given up actually the 3rd most points to quarterback so far per game this season. And I actually crunched a little bit of numbers here. He's averaging 278 yards and 2 2/3 touchdowns per game. He's thrown over 800 yards in 3 games and 8 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. And a little number crunching, that's over 20 points per game. I really think he's the real deal. I thought he would be the better fantasy prospect of Jameis Winston and them between the two, rookie quarterbacks. And he has a decent amount of weapons. He's really clicked with Kendall Wright. He's got Delaney Walker, Justin Hunter, not really fantasy relevant, but can still help him out. And then Dorial Green-Beckham, who, yes, was arrested earlier about a week ago, but he's not going to face his discipline, so he'll be out there. And he may even start running the ball more, which really makes me think that he could have even more fantasy value. And he's got a juicy matchup this week against a defense that really has suffered so far, at least compared to the expectations. So I recommend starting him this week. I don't think Tennessee will win, but I still think that Mariota will have a really good game. Mario, we'll go to you. Who's your quarterback this week that you'd recommend starting, and why?
Okay, I'm really liking Alex Smith this week against Chicago. Chicago has been very friendly to the quarterbacks this year, giving up 10 touchdowns. Smith this year is not really throwing for a lot of touchdowns. He has 4 on the season with 3 picks, but he is sixth most in the yardage with 1,110 yards on the season. So he is dishing the ball out. The weapons there. I mean, you got Kelsey, you got Macklin, you got Jamal Charles. He also runs a little bit, which, is not going to hurt. And, with Chicago, like I said, the defense being as atrocious as it is and traveling to KC, I really think Alex Smith's going to put up a good game this week.
Yeah, they really need a bounce-back game, especially considering how bad they were beaten by Green Bay not too long ago. That was just a little bit embarrassing, and I had hopes for that defense, and it's really been destroyed so far. So here's hoping they have a better game. So, Mike, we'll go to you now. Who is the quarterback that you'd recommend starting this week that people are curious about, and why?
Well, I like Joe Flacco this week. Usually I'm not a big proponent of his, but considering they're playing the Browns, I think that's almost an automatic start for any quarterback. I mean, you could throw Tyrod Taylor or whoever, anybody back there, and they probably do well against the Browns. So I'm going to definitely go with Flacco. I think I like him maybe for a couple touchdowns. And of course he's probably going to be up in that 300-yard mark. I see a pretty good wide open game with those two teams. So yeah, the only problem that I might have is that we need to see what's going to happen with Steve Smith and his back. If he's out, I don't know if they named him out already or if he's, they're waiting to see, but that definitely might be a problem. So keep that in mind. But I just think that the Browns defense is just horrible. So it should be a pretty good matchup for Joe Flacco.
Yeah, to clarify on that, I believe over the past weekend or late last week, they did confirm that Steve Smith will miss this weekend. So will hurt Flacco a little bit, but he does have a good matchup, and maybe, Justin Forsett will get in the game more. Aiken, I should say, had a decent game. So yeah, and you could definitely see him pick apart a defense like that. So we'll go into our running backs now. For me, somebody that probably starting in most leagues or flex worthy, but this week I really like him. It's TJ Yeldon. We talked about him a little bit earlier. He had 22 carries last week for 105 yards. In PPR leagues, it's not that relevant, at least in standard, but in PPR, 2 catches for 4 yards. Facing Tampa Bay, who's given up the 3rd most rushing yards, and teams have rushed on Tampa Bay the 2nd most out of any team in the NFL. Yeldon himself is actually 3rd in rushing attempts in the NFL. He has averaged 20 touches a game per game so far this season. It comes out to 17.5 rushing attempts and 2.5 receiving. So he's definitely being used as a workhorse, as a bell cow. And I'm glad to see that he has been, because I thought he had a lot of potential, not necessarily in this offense, but just given the chance for any team. And as that offense gets better and that pass offense gets more proficient, it's going to open up more lanes and take a lot of pressure off of Yeldon, who I think will not slow down from here. It's definitely worth starting every week, but especially this week. I think we just spoke about, that Jaguars offense, how it's still more sort of emerging, and I think that Yeldon's a big part of it. So I definitely would recommend starting him this week. We'll go to you this time, Mike. Who is the running back you'd recommend starting this week, and why?
Yeah, I like Arian Foster. I think he's had his one game under his belt, And when you're looking at the Indianapolis Colts defense, it's just horrific. So, either it's passing or rushing. They both have, horrible outcomes. Right now, the Colts are 26th against the rush. So I think with that one game he has, getting his feet wet a little bit and coming back, especially against a rival like the Colts, and they need to win. They're 1-3 right now. So I just think that with all that in mind and being a Thursday night game, I would definitely put Arian Foster in with confidence.
Yeah, I like that pick. I picked him last week, actually, and unfortunately he wasn't used as much as I liked, especially considering the matchup. But he's got another good matchup this week, and he'll get even more looks this week. I think he had 8 rushes and 4 catches or something like that. So you could definitely see him starting to return that value right away. Mario, what about you? Who's the running back you talk about this week?
I'm going to go a little deep here, but I kind of like Rashad Jennings this week against the 49ers. The 49ers are 21st against the rush. They're giving up 456 yards and 6 touchdowns, so you can run on them. It averages out to 114 yards per game, 4.1 yards per attempt. Jennings hasn't really done much this year. He's ranked at the bottom of all running backs, but I think the Giants are going to try to control this game on the ground, playing at home. I think Jennings will put up a really nice game.
Yeah, he really needs a game to turn around and sort of solidify his spot as the starting early down back in that offense, especially considering, I'm not saying Williams has done better, but he hasn't done as bad. So it'll be good to see that, especially against that sort of defense. Go into the wide receivers a little bit now. I'm going to pick a guy who usually would start, but he's been out with an injury, and it may come back this week, and people are probably going to be hesitant about him. But that's Alshon Jeffrey. He has not played the last 3 games with his hamstring injury. But a lot of beat writers out there are saying that they're optimistic he will play this week. And Jay Cutler will be there, so that definitely boosts his value. Facing Kansas City has given up the most points to wide receivers so far per game this season. They have the triple crown. They've given up the most most receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns to wide receivers, and this has the makings of a high-scoring game, considering how underwhelming Kansas City's defense has been, and then how porous, I guess you could say, Chicago's defense is. So I really think this could be a shootout. You could see a lot of points being racked up, and I think Alshon Jeffrey could have a pretty good game, even though he's coming back from injury against this really, really bad Kansas City pass defense. So that's my pick this week. Mario, who is the wide receiver that you'd select this week to start and why?
I'm going to go with Jordan Matthews against New Orleans. The Saints are giving up 1,075 yards and 7 touchdowns this season, and I kind of see this game going into a shootout. Matthews has been having the case of the drops a bit lately, but like I said, the fact that I see this game going into a shootout, his targets have been there, so I could see him having a big game this week.
Yeah, another guy who needs a big game. He's got the targets, a little bit down in terms of quarterback play from Sam Bradford, but he's the number 1 guy there. You hope he has a good game, and that New Orleans secondary is something to target on. So I like that pick and really hope that he turns around because I own him in a few leagues as well. Mike, what about you? Who's the wide receiver you'd recommend starting this week?
I like the guy that we sort of talked about already, and that's Travis Benjamin. He's going against Baltimore. That defense, they've allowed 45 and 51 points already in the last 3 outings. So obviously they can be scored against, and that's what the Browns are going to do. They're just going to pass the ball. So if you have Benjamin, I recommend that you do play him this week and just watch those points rack up because he's just going to be targeted either if they're ahead or behind. I just think it's going to be a really blowout type of game, and you want your those big guns in there. You want those Benjamins in there, and I think he's going to do well.
I think that was a money reference, wasn't that? But yeah, no, I like that. I like that pick. The Ravens secondary has not been as good as as a lot of people suspected. And our buddy Tahal Bags is a big fan of their cornerback Jimmy Smith, who has not lived up to expectations. Just don't say it around him, otherwise he might throw things. Going into tight ends, this is a guy I talked about earlier, who I even asked you guys about, but I really like his matchup this week, and I really think he'll come out of the gate scoring. That's Antonio Gates. Has not played so far this season, been suspended the past 4 games, but facing Pittsburgh, who's given up the 4th most points in standard leagues to tight ends per game so far. He's healthy, he's fresh. Rivers is playing at a high level right now, like I said, coming out with 360-yard and a 2-touchdown performance. And for the most part, he's had a really good season. Not to say he couldn't have, but it's refreshing to see, especially at his age. And Pittsburgh has given up 4 touchdowns, which is the 2nd most to tight ends in the whole NFL. So I really think that Antonio Gates could come out and have a really good game to start off. So that's my hope, and that's what I see happening. Considering Ladarius Green was used a decent amount, I can only imagine what Rivers' main boy, Gates is. So that's my pick this week. Mike, who's the tight end you recommend starting this week?
I like Owen Daniels. The Raiders' defense, they're horrible against tight ends.
I knew it.
They've given up, 22, 20, and 16 points, fantasy points against the tight end position. Bennett took him to school last week, and I think this Manning loves his tight ends down in the end zone. So I just think Owen Daniels is going to have a great game against that Raiders defense that for some reason they just can't cover the tight end.
Yeah, for some reason they just can't stop the tight end. I think, Mario, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I told people to start Bennett last week, even though I really did not like it, and turned out to be, I think, a decent pick. I think he had a really good game. I did not like it, but you can almost stream tight ends against Oakland at this point, and Owen Daniels is the next guy up. And I think, while Oakland is 2-2 and has been pretty good, I don't see Denver giving up a lot here. And I'll be talking about that matchup later. But Mario, what about you? Who's the tight end that you recommend starting this week?
The tight end I'm starting this week is a teammate of your quarterback that you'd like to start. That's Delaney Walker against Buffalo. Excuse me. The fact that you really can't run on Buffalo and the Titans don't really have any running game to speak of, I really like Walker this week. Again, the Bills are not really that great against tight ends either. They're giving up 24 receptions, 240 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And before their bye week, Walker saw 10 targets with 7 catches and 68 yards. So I'm looking for him to have a big week.
Yeah, no, he's a guy I targeted going into this season, and he had the hand injury or the thumb injury, and hopefully now with the bye week up, he'll be ready to go. So I have him in a few leagues. So again, cross my fingers, and I'm glad you said that. Switching over to the sit side of it, I don't know what they call him. Is it the Ginger Rocket or something like that? But Andy Dalton, you got to sit him this week. He's been good this season to start off. Especially, with A.J. Green going off, this run game working well, Tyler Eifert back. Andy Dalton threw for 321 yards and a touchdown last week against Kansas City. But guess what? They're facing Seattle, and Seattle's given up the 2nd fewest points to quarterbacks on average so far this season. Held Matt Stafford. Now, granted, Matt Stafford isn't really the gold standard, but held him for just 203 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. And with Cam Chancellor being back, that secondary is just solid. That Legion of Boom is almost complete there. If they have another cornerback, then they'd be complete. But Cam Chancellor, Richard Sherman, you just can't go against it. And I don't think Andy Dalton, I think he'll come back to earth a little bit this week. So I would not recommend starting him, especially considering his hot start and who he's facing. So that's me. Mike, we'll go with you. Mike, we'll go with you. Who is the quarterback that you would recommend sitting this week?
I would recommend sitting Derek Carr. I just, playing against that tough Denver defense, they're pretty much they're probably might even be better than Seattle, but they're either way they're just a really, really strong defense, and I just don't think Carr is, he's definitely quality, but I don't think he needs more seasoning to sort of deal with these kind of defenses, and he's just not there yet. And so with that, playing in Denver, I just think it's just a total bad news for Derek Carr.
Yeah, I hate this matchup this week for the Raiders, and I'll be talking about a guy later who I do not like this week. But I would argue, like you said, that Denver, I think, might have the better overall defense than Seattle, and that's really the main reason why they've stayed undefeated so far. But, Mario, what about you? Who is the quarterback that you'd recommend sitting this week?
I'm almost afraid to say this because I think Taylor will take a plane over here and kick me in the face.
Uh-oh.
But I'm going to have to say Tyrod Taylor this week going to face the Titans. The Titans have been good against the quarterback this year. They're only giving up 584 yards and 6 touchdowns. I know they had their bye week already, so that kind of plays to that. But, they average 195 yards per game to opposing quarterbacks. And Tyrod's coming off that so-so game against the Giants D that's been poor against the pass. And, he faces a much tougher opponent on the road. And the big thing for me is if Carlos Williams is not going to play in this game because he's in the concussion protocol right now, I mean, it's going to make them very one-dimensional. They don't really have anybody else to run the ball there. So I'm a little afraid of Tyrod Taylor this week.
Yeah, you have to be. I streamed him last week for one of my leagues that didn't have that Tom Brady was on a bye, and he did. So of course, the 1 week I streamed him, he didn't do well, or at least well compared to everything else. So of course, sorry to Hall. The sit running back this week for me is Melvin Gordon. 12 carries, 38 yards. Nothing. That's not good, actually. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat. That's not good. 2 catches for 8 yards against Cleveland. But facing Pittsburgh, who've given up the 4th fewest points to running backs in standard leagues per game so far. Pittsburgh, despite their defense not being that very well compared to years past, has not given up any touchdowns to running backs so far this season. Forsett did have a good game, 150 yards, but Melvin Gordon isn't Justin Forsett, and Forsett still didn't get a touchdown last week. Woodhead's cutting in to his touches. I know Woodhead sort of had the majority of the goal line work and the 2-minute work. So I just don't like this matchup this week for Melvin Gordon. I think he'll have another dub this week, even though he'll get a decent amount of carries. So I'd recommend sitting him this week. Mario, what about you? Who is the running back that you tell people to sit this week?
If I can, I'm definitely sitting Carlos Hyde against the Giants. As bad as the Giants have been against the pass, they've been stout against the run. They're only allowing 279 yards and 2 touchdowns, which ranks them number 1 on the season against the run. And just a quick stat about Carlos Hyde. Since week one's 168-yard, 2-touchdown performance, he's had 114 yards, no touchdowns in the last 3 games. So he is a guy I'm definitely sitting this week.
Yeah, he's not been, and that's part of it. And part of it's just because of that offense. That offense is just so bad right now. Besides Carlos Hyde, and it's bringing him down though. So I don't blame you at all this week. Mike, what about you? Who's the running back that you tell people to sit this week?
I'm going to sort of side with you, Doug, a little bit on this. And you picked Andy Dalton. I'm going to pick Jeremy Hill. I fully expect, and I totally agree with you, that Andy Dalton, his consistency has never been there for him. I mean, he could play 2 or 3 games and be lights out, and then just go for a 1 touchdown, 5 interception game, and he's definitely due. And against the Seattle defense, I think that's totally legitimate. So with that being said, you have to look at the running game, and the running game is supposedly Jeremy Hill. Well, they're playing against the Seattle defense that's second in football against the run. So with Andy Dalton having a bad game that I predict, I definitely think Jeremy Hill is going to have a bad game. And it's just, I don't even know if I'd play Giovanni Bernard right now, but definitely you need to sit both of those guys.
Yeah, that's just a tough match overall for Cincinnati. I think this could be the week. I think they're still undefeated. I think this could be the week they really get tested a lot.
Yeah,
got 10 minutes left. I want to sort of speed up a little bit. Talked about Amari Cooper earlier. Actually, we did. We talked about Derek Carr. Oops, I just spilled it. Amari Cooper's the guy I'd sit this week. Been really good this season, and how could you not expect it? Number 4 overall pick. A lot of people panned him as one of the best wide receiver prospects in a while. But don't like this matchup this week against Denver. He did have 9 targets, 4 catches, 49 yards, and a touchdown. But Denver's given up the 3rd fewest points to wide receivers in standard leagues per game. Cooper only saw 2 targets in the second half, 0 catches, and Denver's only given up 1 receiving touchdown to wide receivers all season. I just don't like this matchup this week for really anybody in Oakland, whether that's Michael Crabtree, Derek Carr, Latavius Murray, even, and Amari Cooper. So I definitely would shy away from this a little bit. But Amari Cooper, something I'd sit this week. Mike, we'll go back to you this time. Wide receiver that you would recommend sitting this week?
I think I would sit. I'm having a toss up between Devon Austin and Brandon Cooks, and I think I'm going to go with the more controversial one, and that's Brandon Cooks. He's just been another one of those surprises that everybody got, especially in PPR leagues. That was going to be great. Going to be Drew Brees' sort of rock, and he just hasn't gotten it done at all this year. I think it's too early to say that he won't get it done, but until he can do something on the field, I'm just going to stay away from him.
Yeah, Brandon Cooks has been a disappointment this season, and really hope that with Drew Brees getting healthier, he can turn it around. But yeah, this matchup this week isn't really going to help. So I gotta agree with you and give you a 1-up on that. Mario, what about you? Who's the wide receiver that you'd recommend sitting this week?
The guy I'm sitting has been really hot lately, but I'm sitting James Jones against the Rams. Like I say, he's been a beast this year. Aaron Rodgers has really been targeting him. But the Rams' D has been pretty stout against wide receivers, only giving up 3 touchdowns. And the stat I found pretty fascinating was the longest pass against them has only been 35 yards. So Jones being a deep threat kind of guy and them not really giving that kind of thing up, he's a guy I would sit this week.
Yeah, no, it's crazy to think that the Giants cut him, and I don't think they'll ever be able to let that down. But yeah, James Jones against that not surprisingly, but the Rams beating, I think, Arizona and Seattle this season, could definitely have a game where they really give a tough opponent like Green Bay a hard time this week. And maybe James Jones will actually come back down to earth. Who knows? I'm going to go a little bold here, considering most people are still going to start him, and they probably shouldn't because I'm telling you not to, and, I'm telling you not to. But Jimmy Graham is the guy I'd want to sit this week. He's really, I don't know. I had high hopes for him. I thought he would do really well, considering the lack of targets in Seattle, but he is not. And didn't have a good game last night. Only 5 targets for 4 catches and 29 yards, I should say, against Detroit. Facing Cincinnati, they gave up 6 catches and 49 yards to Travis Kelce last week. Cincinnati has given up 0 touchdowns to tight ends this season. Graham not very involved in offense. It's just been a disappointment. And that whole offense is really struggling, especially when Marshawn Lynch wasn't there. And Thomas Rawls, unfortunately, didn't do as well as we had hoped. So I just don't think Jimmy Graham is going to have a good week this week. And if you can, please sit him, because I just don't think he'll have a good game. Mario, who's the tight end you'd recommend sitting this week?
The tight end I recommend sitting this week is a guy we spoke about earlier, and that's Gary Barnidge going against the Ravens. I know with bye weeks coming up, he looks like a popular guy to put into your lineup, but this is definitely not the week to do it. The Ravens have been tremendous, actually number 1 against the tight end. They have only given up 8 receptions for 31 yards and no touchdowns against the tight end. And they face guys like Tyler Eifert and Heath Miller, so they face some legitimate competition, but they are just not giving up anything to tight ends. So I know, like I said, with bye weeks being a problem right now, still not a guy I would put into my lineup this week.
Yeah, I saw that, and I'm like, oh, no, Gary Barnidge. But I didn't want to say anything, so I went even more bold and said Jimmy Graham. But, yeah, it's just a tough matchup this week. Mike, last but not least, tight end that you'd sit this week.
I got to sit Heath Miller. I mean, just basically based on who they have at quarterback. When you have Michael Vick throwing the ball, you're not going to get much out of his arm. So, I mean, look at what Antonio Brown did, for instance, last week. I think he got, 4 catches or something to that effect. So Vick is just going to be a killer to all the offense around him. And that being said, I just can't trust Heath Miller to do anything until, Roethlisberger comes back, if he comes back.
Yeah, especially with Martavius Bryant coming back. That's another mouth to throw to. And Heath Miller's sort of, I can't even call him a safety valve really anymore. So I think the only reason we still talk about him is just because of how sparse it is for tight ends, which it's been for a long time now. So, yeah, but I just, with Michael Vick there, a lot of guys are getting downgrades, especially Antonio Brown, who I love dearly. I would expect everybody to, but I loved him first. So that will do it for us here tonight with the Nickel Press Show and our start-sit edition. Finishing a little bit early. I got to plug some things, though, so that works out perfectly. Make sure you follow our guest, Mike Valverde, on Twitter, and forgive me if I'm wrong, RFL Red Zone.
Perfect.
Awesome. So follow him at RFL Red Zone on Twitter. Be sure to follow Mario on Twitter at Mario_Roto, ROTO 108 at Twitter. Be sure to follow me as well, obviously, at DMoore, DMOORE NFL on Twitter. Follow the Nickel Press at Nickel Press Show on Twitter. Be sure to check out our YouTube page, the same name. Be sure to follow Dynasty League Football if you already aren't. For some strange reason, a lot of great writers over there, a lot of great insight, and Mike's one of them. At DL Football, I guess you could say. Be sure to check out Hanging Einstein with Andy Singleton, another one of our members of the Nickel Press. He's on Twitter at People's Pen, I should say, with a Z and 7S. That will be up tomorrow night. Be sure to check out our DFS piece. It'll be up, I believe, Wednesday or Thursday. And also be sure to check out our live show Sundays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., right up till kickoff Eastern Time. That's live on our YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe to the page. Be sure to follow all these guys. Follow everything I told you. But in terms of Week 5, good luck. And hopefully, now you're just a little bit smarter and a little bit more prepared after hearing us. So we're going to finish 90 seconds early, as the woman in my ear just told me. But, guys, thanks for coming on. Thanks for coming on, Mike. Appreciate it. And good luck this week, guys. And, we'll talk soon.
Excellent. Thank you for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, Mike, it's been fun. Thanks, man.
Yeah, everybody have a great night.
Yeah.
Take care, guys.